So who would like to get us started from Sloka 45?
I can do it.
Please go ahead.
Aho bata mahatpapam kartum vyavasita vayam yadrajya sukha lobhena hantum swajana mudyataha.
Awesome.
Aho bata, alas, yet that Rajya Sukha Lobhena, due to greed for a kingdom and its pleasures, Swajanam, our own people, Hantunam Udyata, ready to kill, Vayam, we, Mahat Papam, grave sin, Kartum Vyavasita, are determined to commit. Alas, ready to kill our own people due to greed for a kingdom and its pleasures, we are determined to commit a grave sin. Up until this verse, Arjuna's lamentation focused on what he was about to do. Here, however, although the first arrow had yet to be shot, we see that Arjuna was bothered by all these people having come to fight. He asks himself, what were we thinking of when we gathered all these armies to declare war and to come to Kurukshetra? What happened to that thinking, that Viveka that I now have? Where was it? Because it was not there, we are here in the battlefield right now. Why did I not figure this all out before? Why upon us? What kind of papa caused us to decide to come here, determined to commit this great universal sin, the destruction of Dharma? Running away with his own train of thoughts, Arjuna had now come to this conclusion. Lobha is greed or longing. When you have a kingdom, Rajyam, you have all the pleasures, Sukha, that go with it, the best music, dancers, poets who praise you daily, titles and salutations, all of which boost your ego. This is what is meant by a power trip. For a mortal, this power is very enticing. Is it not greed for the kingdom and pleasures that has made us come with our stockpiles of weapons, prepared to fight and kill our own people? Arjuna mused. Since they would be destroying their own people, Arjuna became ill at ease at the very thought that they could ever have considered doing such a thing.
Awesome. And we all know that Arjuna wasn't here for just the kingdom, isn't it? So it's just the delusion. So we'll talk about it as soon as we finish these slokas. We'll do a quick recap and do the summary, and we will expand on that a little bit more there. Do you want to continue to the next sloka as well?
Yeah, I can do that. यदि मप्रतीकार मशस्त्रं शस्त्रपाणायः धार्तराष्ट्रा रणे अन्युस्तन्मे क्षेमतरं भवेत्.
Do you mind if I split that into
Sure.
little words so at least everybody can understand? Yadi mam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah Dartrarashtra Rane Hanyuhu Tanme Kshemataram Bhavet. He's saying even if Dartrarashtra's came and killed me, like unarmed, if they were to kill me, that's okay with me. Okay, we'll look at the meaning. Go ahead.
Yadi, if apratikaram, who does not retaliate, ashastram, who is unarmed, me, shastrapanayah, who are with weapons in hand, Dhartarashtra, the sons of Dhritarashtra, Rane, in battle, Hanyu, were to kill, me, for me, Semestaram, better, Bhavet.
Kshemataram.
How do you say that?
Sorry, that's Kshemataram.
Kshemataram, better, Bhavet, will be. It will be better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra with weapons in hand were to kill me, who is unarmed and who does not retaliate in the battle. Krishna must have looked at Arjuna in wonderment. He had been going on, and now he was telling him that if they gave up the fight, they may all be killed. But he did not care. Arjuna was determined not to fight back. However, this kind of thinking was not shared by those in the other camp. It was only in Arjuna's mind. Therefore, if Arjuna was not going to fight, either he would have to run away from the battlefield or stand there unarmed and be killed. Arjuna would be unarmed but not disarmed. He would have voluntarily given up all his arms. Moreover, he thought that if it was better if he were to be killed. Let it be for my good, he said. Myself not being killed but destroying all these people would definitely not be good for my good. I am going to suffer from the pains that I caused by destroying all these people. It will always haunt me, even if I am killed in the process. Alive, I am going to be haunted, and dead, I will haunt this battlefield where my arrows destroyed my own people. It is even worse, said Arjuna. Having, having decided not to fight, Arjuna concluded that being killed would be better. What Arjuna then did was recounted to Dhritarashtra by Sanjaya in the last verse of this chapter.
Awesome. So we'll move on to the next sloka as well. Would anybody want to read from here?
I can read.
Please go ahead.
Sanjay Vacha Eva Muktvarjuna Sankhye Radhopastaupavishat Visrujya Sasharam Chapam Shokasam Vignamanasah. Sanjay Vacha. Sanjaya said, Arjuna, Evam, in this matter, Uktva, having spoken, Sankhye, in the middle of the battlefield, Sasharam, along with arrows, Kapam, the bow, Vishrajya, casting aside, Shoka Samvigna, Manasa, with his mind completely overcome by sorrow, Ratha Upaste, on the seat of the chariot, Upavisat, sat down. Sanjaya said, having spoken in this manner in the middle of the battlefield, Arjuna, whose mind was completely overcome by sorrow, sat down on the seat of the chariot, casting aside his bow and arrows. Because Sanjaya was narrating the whole dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna to Dhritarashtra, the entire Gita is actually in the form of narration by Sanjaya, although it was really Vyasa who was speaking. There is a particular style involved here, which we need to be aware of. There are quotations within quotations. Throughout the Gita, we have to remember that Sanjaya was describing what happened on the battlefield to Dhritarashtra. Here, Sanjaya first quoted Arjuna, and then in this verse, Vyasa reminds his reader that Sanjaya was talking to Dhritarashtra. Arjuna had been standing in his chariot in order to see all the people with whom he was to fight. Finding his own people on all sides, he concluded that it would be better for him to be killed. Having thus spoken to Krishna, Arjuna sat down in the chariot, which was in the middle of the battlefield, right between the two armies. This verse also provides a few more details concerning Arjuna's condition. Putting his bow and arrows aside, Arjuna sat back, his mind completely overwhelmed by sorrow. He felt sadness because the situation was so sad. That he had come to fight with his own people was not a happy thought. Although he was sad, Arjuna did not run away from the battlefield because something inside told him that perhaps there was some defect, some fallacy in his thinking. He was a man of dharma. He had been well brought up, and his present thoughts were all colored by his vision. There was some truth in his argument, but at the same time, dharma was involved in it. Hence, it was not easy to resolve the issues involved. Arjuna was a person who was supposed to take care of law and order. He had a job to do, one that was mandated by the Shastra, by the society, by the crown, and for that reason, he did not run away from the battlefield. He could have set out for the Himalayas, the distance from Kurukshetra not being much. It would therefore have been very easy for him to go. However, he did not run away because he knew that there was some problem with his thinking. Instead, he sat there in the chariot in the middle of the battlefield so that Krishna could talk to him. We sometimes tell someone that we do not want to do something, but still we listen to other person's point of view. Why? Because we have a doubt about what we want or do not want. Otherwise, we would not be available for discussion. That Arjuna sat there indicates that something was telling him that there was a fallacy in his thinking and that he stood to be corrected and he was ready for it. The first chapter of the Gita ends with these words.
Awesome.
Thank
So before we start this one, the next part, the ending part of the sloka, I just want to mention that this is very specific. This is not in the original Bhagavad Gita. It's not from Mahabharatam. And this is recited, what I notice is recited mostly in the Advaita Vedanta books, not usually followed in the Madhvacharya's Dvaita commentaries or the Visishtadvaita commentaries. And here, what it like, there is a beautiful description, thankfully, Guruji provides for this conclusion, and it is important to chant, and you will understand why. Um, who would like to chant this? Satiji, would you like to conclude that for us? And we'll do the second part of the reading about that sloka. Satiji, are you on mute?
Yes, sorry.
No worries.
इति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासूपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्ण. That's the one, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Please go ahead.
श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे अर्जुनविषादयोगो नाम प्रथमोऽध्यायः.
Awesome. And would you like to continue reading for the 102 topics?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Om Tat Sat. Om Brahman is the only reality. Iti thus. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su. In the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishatsu. In the Upanishad, Brahma Vidyayam. In the knowledge of Brahman, Yoga Shastre. In the Yoga Shastra, Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. In the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, Arjuna Vishada Yoga Nama, called the yoga topic of Arjuna's sorrow. Pratama Adhyaya, first chapter. Om Brahman is the only real. Om Brahman is the only real. Thus ends the first chapter called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, having the topic of Arjuna's sorrow in the Bhagavad Gita, which is in the form of a dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, which is the essence of the Upanishads, whose subject matter is both the knowledge of Brahman and yoga. Traditionally, the words Om Tat Sat go before this line. Om is the name for Brahman, and Brahman alone is the reality. Tat Sat. This expression indicates a conclusion. After all that is said and done, the reality is only Brahman. Om Tat Sat. Srimad means that which is endowed with all kinds of wealth, including Vidya, that which gives you everything. The word Srimad here is prefixed to Bhagavad Gita and is used for emphasis. Sri means all wealth, and Sriman can be the title for the Guru. Here, Bhagavan plays the role of Guru. Bhaga is the sixfold absolute virtues, as we have seen, and Bhagavan is therefore the one who has absolute Sri. All wealth belongs to Bhagavan, as does all knowledge, fullness, dispassion, overlordship, power, fame, the sixfold bhaga. The one who has these virtues is called Ishvara, the Lord, otherwise called Bhagavan. Thus, Bhagavan is a definition of Ishvara, and the one who can really be called as Sriman is Bhagavan alone. The title Srimad is used here because Bhagavan has assumed the role of a teacher in the Gita. Here, the word yoga refers to anything a person needs in terms of preparation of the mind that is needed for the assimilation of this knowledge. Since the Gita discusses all these along with the Brahma Vidya, it is also referred to as Yoga Shastra. Sriman is the nominative singular form in the masculine of the noun base Srimad. The chapters and verses, should I continue or somebody else
Yeah,
wants
please
to?
go ahead. Like you maybe want just to conclude till the topic. I don't know where it is ending, but go ahead for
Oh,
a few more few more paragraphs.
the chapters and verses of the Bhagavad Gita have the same vision as that of the Upanishad. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita is referred to as the Upanishad. The reference here being to the Gita that is yet to come, since the actual Gita has not yet begun. The Upanishads are the self knowledge that destroys samsara, a life of becoming sorrow. The Gita also destroys sorrow. By giving Arjuna self knowledge, the Gita removed his sorrow that is highlighted in the first chapter. Therefore, the Gita is equated to the Upanishads, whose subject matter is Brahma Vidya, knowledge of Brahman. The Gita is not simple psychotherapy, it is much more than that. It deals with what Brahman is, revealing the reality of the self as Brahman. Being identical to the Upanishads, in terms of its subject matter, the Gita cannot but be Brahma Vidya, knowledge of Brahman. It is also Yoga Shastra because it talks about yoga for maturity, preparing the mind for the knowledge. Yoga Shastra means Karma Yoga Shastra, which includes disciplines, values, religious rituals, prayers, and so on. Performing duties is yoga. Also, when the Gita talks about bhakti, it is yoga. When it talks about karma to be done with bhakti, it is all karma yoga. Even when it talks about sannyasa, it is jnana yoga. Since sannyasa can also be a means for an end to be achieved, it is yoga. Sannyasa as an end is the knowledge that I am Brahman and not a karta or bhokta. All of this will be analyzed later. The Gita, then, is both Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra, which is purely Karma Yoga, implying devotion as well as all other disciplines that are used as means for preparing the mind for the self knowledge. Also, included in this closing line are the words in the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. It is because the dialogue had already started in the first chapter. The subject matter of this chapter was Arjuna's lamentation, his sorrow, his grief, his despair. Thus, the title, The Yoga of Arjuna's Sorrow, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Of course, the title of the chapter does not imply that the first yoga we are to practice is sorrow. The, the word yoga has various meanings, as can be seen from the synonyms given in dictionaries. Yoga is nirodha, control or mastery. It also means upaya, a means of achieving something. Any form of meditation, dhyana, is called yoga. And a connection, sangati, meaning a subject matter, vishaya, is also called yoga. Each of the 18 chapters of the Gita has the word yoga in its title, beginning with Arjuna's sorrow. Therefore, the correct meaning of the word yoga here is sangati, connection or subject matter. For instance, in the fifth chapter, Jnana Karma Sannyasa as the Vishaya, the subject matter, which is not to suggest that it talks about a yoga called Jnana Karma Sannyasa, is to be practiced. The Gita talks about karma, about knowledge, sannyasa, meditation, devotion, the vision of the cosmic person, the division between the knower and the known, and so on. What is this division? Is there a division? This is the topic of the 13th chapter called Kshetra Kshetrakna Yoga. So, the word yoga in this chapter titles does not refer to the practice of yoga, but to the subject matter. It must be clearly understood because there's a lot of confusion about its meaning. Some people maintain that despair is necessary and without it we cannot come to spiritual life. Thus, we must work ourselves into despair. Despair is not something we need to work for. Everyone has it. But we have to go to the 10th floor of a building and find out that the elevator is not working. Despair begins. Despair need not be practiced. We are despair. We are born for despair alone. We are brought up in despair, continue to be in despair, and are despair to everyone else. The purpose of this first chapter of the Gita was to describe the particular type of thinking which will lead to self knowledge. How you think, what leads you to a particular type of thinking, what kind of heart you must have in order to do this inquiry, vichara, all these are necessary to know. Therefore, the chapter reveals Arjuna's nobility, his commitment to dharma, and his confusion. A mature person can be confused, and therefore, Arjuna's confusion represents anyone's confusion. This confusion can lead to a certain type of thinking and to questions about what I really am. A person has to be led to this type of thinking, which is why a chapter about Arjuna's despair was included in the Gita. When Shankara wrote his Gita Bhashya, his commentary on the Gita, he ignored this chapter and the first few verses of the second chapter. A Bhashya comments only on that which requires explanation. Because the beginning of the Gita can easily be understood by anyone who can understand by just reading, Shankara's Bhashya commentary is restricted to that which had to be discussed. The Gita itself, starting with Sri Bhagavanuvacha in the 11th verse of the second chapter. The subject matter of the first chapter then leads to the second chapter. Arjuna's Vishada, despair, led to his Vichara, inquiry. Vishada can lead one either to inquiry or to escape, including suicide, death being another means of escape. In Arjuna's case, it led him to Vichara. Krishna made sure that he did, and therefore we have the Gita.
Awesome. That concludes our chapter one. So, what I wanted to do today was to just give a gist of summary of what we have learned in chapter one, because we've been reading like 47 slokas over a few weeks. And then hopefully we'll finish that summary today. And next Friday, we'll start with chapter two. And as Swamiji was trying to explain here, chapter one is just the introduction, kind of an extension to the context of Gita we studied a few weeks ago on what is a samsara, the problem of samsara. It's more of an explanation of that. As Swamiji was saying, we are born into it. Some of us realize it more intensely than some others, given how our lifestyles and how we take things. Like, the same problem could be seen through a magnifying glass by one person, whereas the other person would just probably very easily take it. But all of us live in this bubble. So this chapter is more about explanation of what samsara is, and then chapter two is where the actual teaching will start. And chapter two actually serves as headlines, like in the newspaper. But chapter three onwards, we will start getting practical steps, and very intense learnings come from chapter three. But chapter two is super, super important, and I think the best chapter. I think the more like what you gather overall, what's happening in Gita, all of that is encompassed in chapter two. But for now, we'll jump into doing a quick summary of chapter one. So, uh, And when I say it's a summary of chapter one, you will understand that I'm not talking about like who blew the conches and things like that, but it is more about we'll focus on why is this chapter called Arjuna Vishada Yogam, and what does Vishada mean, and how that is like a universal problem. It's not like one person has it and the other person doesn't, and what are the remedies that go with it, or maybe what are some of those psychological factors that go with Vishada. So we'll look at those pieces. So, in order to live a physically healthy life, a person requires two factors, right? One is the objective factor, which is keeping a hygienic environment, so there are no germs that will cause diseases. At the same time, there is also the subjective factor, which is the resistance or immunity of each and every individual. So we've known that some people can drink uh, any kind of water anywhere and they're absolutely fine, and some other people need to drink that like filtered water, and they don't have immunity to be able to drink anything, right? And this is very common. So certain things are very suitable to some people, but some certain other things are not suitable. So our immunity and resistance is different. If you extend this principle to mental health, there are also two factors that are related. And when we talk about mental health, we're talking about mind is free from any of the psychological diseases, or what Vedanta or Shastras call them as the Arishad Vargas. So there are six. Everybody knows that the Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. And then the dharma, punya, papa, all of this, vichakshana is also critically important. So all these psychological diseases, like in the form of anxiety, stress, and strain, and worry, anger, jealousy, inferiority complex. There are so many forms and shapes and forms of even these problems. So even for principle like the principle of mental health, then there are two factors. One is generally we talk about the external factors. We say how the world is responsible for my worries, how the spouse is responsible for my tension. Oh, like he doesn't take care of any of the activities, or oh, she spends a lot, whatever could be the reasons. So it could be our work, it could be our families, or it could be the environment, or it could be the weather, it could be the government. We have so many problems, or it could be people driving on the road, that could cause us frustration. So just like the environment, the hygienic surroundings are just not totally responsible for living a physically healthy life and not having diseases, but my body also requires the immunity and resistance. Even in the case of mental weaknesses, there are two factors that are involved. One is do I should take into account what's in the environment. Sure, there are external factors, but also the second question, do I have sufficient resistance to face such scenarios or any scenario that get presented to me? And in order to the next step of this is, once we understand that we can take control of our life, whether I'm contented with my life, whether I have a secure, happy, relaxed life or not. But like all of us have tried changing scenarios, trying to change my husband. And many people ask me, oh, is your husband also on the path of spirituality? Does he also do like Sri Vidya practice, or does he also does study Vedanta? Or why wouldn't you want to tell him? So it's about changing the factors. Oh, I want to change a job. I don't like my car. I want to change a car. I don't like my neighborhood. I want to change a house. There are so many things we are trying to change, but we also get frustrated because we don't have full control of changing everything that is in the surroundings. So the other factor is sufficient resistance to face these scenarios, and how do we get to that point? What my Guruji used to say very, very frequently is, what is the sign of a healthy body? like, physically healthy body, we say diseases are less frequent. That's number one. The intensity of the disease is also very less. That's number two. And the duration of the disease, how quickly I can recover from it, is how long it lasts, is also very less. The after effect of the disease is also very less. So, what he calls as the frequency, intensity, and recency. And he used to joke around and call it like the file and FIR. So, frequency, intensity, and recency report. Similarly, you can apply the same principles into like the more of the weakness of the mind and how we are currently dealing with our psychological stresses and whatnot. So if my mind has sufficient strength and resistance, number of psychological problems I face, like frustration and all of those things we were talking about, those should not occur frequently. The frequency is less. That means, my family is not suffering because of my, frequency of anger or stress. The frequency of the psychological disturbance is less. The second benefit is the intensity of whether it is anger or frustration. It will last very less, and the intensity is very less also, and the duration is also very less. There is one quote my Guruji used to state. There is a subhashitam in Sanskritam. It says, "Uttame kshanakopasya, madhyame ghatikadvayam, adhame syat ahoratram, papishte maranandakaha." What it translates to is, anger is a sign of a healthy person. Like, all of us are not supposed to be angry less, but at the same time, how long is the anger lasting in somebody? So they say an uttama person has a kshanakopam. He gets it and he recovers and moves on from it. A madhyama person has ghatikadvayam, like, 1 to 2 hours. He will have that anger and then he can move on. Then there is the adhama person. He has it, overnight, ahoratram, like, whoever comes in front, he'll have all of that frustration on the other person too. And then papishte maranandakaha, till death it will continue. So they will never forgive, never forget. So he used to say, for a healthy mind, frequency, intensity, and duration should be very less, and finally the after effect also has to be less. This freedom from mental diseases caused by external factors is called as moksha. And it is a different definition than some of us would have heard as in childhood, that moksha comes after death and then when we reach Bhagavan. But there is a different aspect of videha mukti and jivan mukti. We can be free of all of these things and have a much more liberated life, even in the present state, and we don't have to die for it. So in second chapter, Bhagavan actually talks about, there is one sloka, very important part of chapter 2, which is chapter 25 and 26, slokas 25 and 20, sorry, 55 and 56. Dukkeshvanuद्विग्नमनाः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहः वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते is the sloka, where it translates to, Jnani, or a free person, is one who also faces challenges and difficulties. They're not going to not have those difficulties, but an anudvignamanaha, his resistance is so much that he's not shattered to carry the problem to others. And he is not shattered and he is not even bubbling inside. So subject matter of the Gita is developing this inner resistance and not changing the external world. So it's not like, suddenly once we study Bhagavad Gita, all our problems will be solved, but we will have better resistance on how to deal with these. And then after probably finishing the 18 chapters, you would realize that none of these are even problems. So, jokingly, Swamiji used to call this the resistance building Shastram. And I was smiling when you were reading about Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra. That's what I remembered. And who is Gita Shastra meant for? That's also important, right? Not everything is a medicine for everybody, for all their problems. But who is Gita Shastra meant for? This is meant for those people who recognize that we have to improve our resistance, that I have got some psychological weaknesses, that I am susceptible to raga dvesha, that I have kama krodha, that I am getting into some psychological breakdown, or I need freedom. And that is the most important inner urge all of us have. Whether how we deal with our anger may be very different, and some people may get angry, some people may just, ignore it and move on. But all of us have this inner urge for freedom, inner urge for happiness. Everything that we do is like, the message that I shared it, thanks to Shaji Mahoday, who found that clip for us. Everything that we do, we are doing it to gain happiness, to gain that liberation, and it is for those people. Then, mm, before I try to change the world or improve the world, first let me strengthen myself, is the concept that we have to look into. And one who has discovered the requirement for this need to improvise upon ourselves or build our inner strength, that person now is on the path to seeking the self-realization, or is a spiritual seeker. And this is when, now in chapter 2, we will see Arjuna, you know, becomes a spiritual seeker, and then the next step he surrenders to a guru, and the guru will give him the medication. So we will look into that as well. So in the first chapter, Vyasa was presenting this context to us, in which the Arjuna discovers his problem, and then what are the different stages of the realization, and what is happening once he realizes. That's what is explained. So the chapter can be divided into four major parts, as we have discussed in the past too. In the first portion, which is from slokas 1 to 20, Vyasacharya is presenting the context. In Kurukshetra, Pandavas and Kauravas have assembled to fight and settle their issues. Arjuna has been very clear that he is doing the right thing. He never had any conflict or any question about it. He never had any guilt that he is going to kill all of these people, uh, because he had clear understanding that he is doing it as a last resort, because all other non-violent methods have been exhausted. Even Krishna actually was sent as a messenger to try to settle this peacefully and amicably, and even that did not work. So Arjuna, without any regret, any guilt, he has come to the battlefield. So even Arjuna went and did whole like tapas, and there's this kavyam called Kirata Arjuniyam that we are currently studying. So where Arjuna actually even fights with Shiva to get Pashupatastram to be utilized in this battle. So he has done many of these tapas and earned a lot of weapons in preparation to get into this battlefield. Then the next stage of what happens is like the Duryodhana goes to Dronacharya and enumerates the important people in both the armies. So we get a context of who is in the battlefield, and all amazing warriors who are on both the sides. And then Duryodhana also betrays his diffidence by stating that their army is stronger and our army is weaker. That is a statement, right? Like he has 11 Akshauhinis worth of army, whereas Pandavas have 7 Akshauhinis, but somehow he feels like he has lesser strength. And we have also, no, Swamiji was explaining that it could be possible that Duryodhana was feeling that dharma is on the other side. So he's weakened, and then Bhishmacharya enthuses him by blowing the conch, and everybody, all the soldiers and all the warriors have blown their conches, and the beginning of the battle is about to start. The next part of the chapter is the second portion, which is from verses 21 to 25, which is where Arjuna feels somehow has this flash of a thought, that he tells Krishna that I want to take a closer look at the warriors from on both the sides. So please take me and just, place the chariot in between the two armies. So though Arjuna was about to go into a suffering by just, going and having the chariot placed in between the two armies, suddenly that's a change in scenario. But ultimately, it is for the Lokopakaram, we get Gita Shastra out of it. So, which was a great decision by Arjuna. And in this scenario, when Arjuna asked the chariot to be placed, to be noticed is Arjuna is the master and Krishna is just a suta, a driver of the chariot or the charioteer. And it's more of, an order that he has given to Krishna, and then Krishna just simply follows the instruction. But being the Bhagwan, Krishna also has done a little naughty work at that time, and he purposefully placed the chariot in front of these particular people who Arjuna is very, very attached to. So he places it in front of Bhishma and Dronacharya. And once, I think, that's why Parthasarathi suddenly becomes the Gita Acharya after this scenario. Then we go into the third portion, which is where the samsara and all of these problems will come into picture. This portion is 26 to 28 verses, where Arjuna discovers his weakness and the consequent problem. And what is his weakness? It's presented the problem is presented as attachment or raga. And why is raga an attachment, like, raga or attachment a weakness? Because we are all attached to our families, we are all attached to our work, or we have friends. But why is attachment being shown as a problem? This is the most critical, important piece that we have to understand. And I'll also give an example my Guruji used to say very often. So, anything that I'm psychologically dependent on, then that means my happiness is no more in my own hands. My happiness is hooked to or is connected to that external factor. For example, I would think I love springs or I love summers and I don't like winter. So there is a raga and a dvesha. I am super enthused, super excited during summer and I do all sorts of activities. And then, obviously, just like, Bhagwan even uses that in a sloka, just like after summer, winter is supposed to come. And then when winter arrives, then we go into these winter blues. We don't like it. We don't like the weather. We don't like to drive in that weather. Many other psychological problems that will follow that. And unfortunately, none of these external factors are under our control. So, for example, if you say that a disobedient son is the cause of my sorrow, Vedanta will say, uh, it'll say you're stating it wrongly. You just have to twist the statement a little bit. The problem is not the disobedient son. The dependence you have on your son's obedience is your problem. I'll repeat that one more time. The problem is not your disobedient son. That you depend upon the obedience of your son is your problem. And that is what is causing you to be not happy. So, to depend upon his obedience for my happiness, we are placing the problem of lack of resistance if that doesn't happen. Did I make any sense? Please stop me where you feel you have a question or if I need to repeat something and I'm going a little too fast.
Oh, it makes sense. Yes.
Okay. So once I know, so to depend upon his obedience for my happiness, I'm placing the problem to the lack of resistance on myself. So now I have just suddenly turned the problem is not him, the problem is in me depending on that. Therefore, now I can do something about the situation and gain control over it. because I have very less control on the disobedient son. So this psychological dependence or the psychological need is called the problem of raga or attachment or expectation. You can give it many names. So in the case of Arjuna, he has imagined a life without Bhishma and without Drona and without some other family members, and that's it. He broke down. All the rage and everything that he was doing for more than 13 years plus, or probably even they were young, they were still fighting for things. All of that suddenly just gone into the drain, and now he broke down and he wants to run away from the battlefield. Uh, so Vedanta never talks about physical independence, because we have to be dependent on farmers for raising food and so many millions of people that are helping us sustain. So Vedanta is not talking about physical independence. It's talking about emotional and psychological dependence is not required, to the degree not required. And Vedanta will strictly say you don't need any psychological dependence on anybody or anything or any place. It's not attached. Your mind is supposed to be free of all of these things. And in the sloka 255, which is the ultimate lesson from Gita, and I love that verse so much, Bhagavan says, Atmanyeva Atmana Tushtaha. That is the Sthita Prajna Lakshanas. And he says that particular phrase, I am happy with myself in spite of external factors being favorable or unfavorable. And favorable, unfavorable, the words itself says that I like something and I don't like something. And throughout Bhagavad Gita, we'll keep, getting that question on why should I like something or why should I dislike something? If everything is Bhagwan's creation, everything is a scenario being presented to you, why do you even have to like or dislike anything? So that's from the third topic. Then the fourth topic, which is the consequence of raga, which is shoka. Or shoka means grief or sorrow. And this is happening between shlokas 28 and 34. Shoka, the other meaning or other word for shoka is Vishada, and that's why this whole chapter is called as Arjuna Vishada Yogam. And grief is an inevitable consequence of dependence. Because when I depend upon an external factor, it's fine. But it is a potential danger because just like I lean on something, the chair or on the wall, if the wall falls, I will also fall with it. So any leaning or on an unpredictable, perishable factor is going to cause sorrow at one point or the other. And Arjuna also faces the same problem. Not that the object is gone, Bhishma and Drona are right in front of him, but he mentally imagines this state where they may not be available to him or he may have to kill them. Then he goes into this kripaya paraya vishtu vishidan nidam abravit. So he just goes into this sorrow mode. And the intensity of the grief depends on the intensity of the dependence or attachment. In the case of Arjuna, we have seen that. Sorry, I'm just going to mute. So, in the case of Arjuna, we have seen that his mental affliction with raga and shoka. Suddenly he had physical symptoms that he is not able to hold to his gandivam, and his hands and legs are shaking, and he is like his skin is burning. He's seen some physical symptoms. Then the next final topic is from 35 to 47, which is the last sloka, which is the next consequence. After raga and shoka come the moha, which is confusion, delusion, conflict, and that sort of emotion, and decision making, so-called logical decision making, but it is very irrational because you're not deciding purely based on intellect, you're adding emotion to it. So the confusion is what to do and what not to do. and I do not know what to do. So I'm confused. And that is the moha or aviveka. So Arjuna faces the same confusion whether to fight or not to fight. And therefore, he makes a series of wrong conclusions and sees dharma yuddham suddenly starts looking as adharma. So by killing these criminals, and there is this beautiful word, and we have seen this very recently. There is a term called atatayinaha. So he says, "Papameva shreyadasman hatvai natatayinaha." So by killing these criminals, we will get papam, is what he's saying. So if we punish criminals, and it is the dharmam for a kshatriya in those days. Now there are courts, of course. In those days, the kshatriya dharmam was to punish criminals, imprison them, and he should not be incurring sin for that. But that is an opportunity for him to protect dharma. The other part is sin or papam has two types, right? There is one that is you commit the papam, or that you omit not doing the right thing and let the papam happen, which is we can be considered as a commission and the omission papams. And omission papam is called as pratyavaya papam in shastras. So Arjuna was about to do pratyavaya papam, but he feels that by killing he's doing the papam. So there is confusion in papa punya vichakshana rahitam. So he's currently in the confusion between which is right and which is not. So first is he got confused between dharma and adharma, and then papa punya vivekam, even that is now getting confused. So in these series of arguments, Arjuna points out that the family is very important for culture. Independently, if you take out like his points of view, they're very valid points. Whether they suit the whole context of what's happening, that's where the difficulty is. So he was right that family is very important for culture. Society in which family is not respected, of course, culture will break down. So none of those are invalid. It's just that the context in which he is saying that, that is what is causing him to apply wrong shastra, right shastra in the wrong situation. So these three put together, the raga, shoka, and moha, so the attachment, sorrow, and delusion, is called as samsara. And in our regular language nowadays, we use samsara to be, or samsari is somebody who is a grihastha, which is very funny. And because my Swamiji, my puja Guruji was a sannyasi, he used to make a lot of fun about this, that he is a sannyasi and we were all samsaris. But he also would just give an explanation that even if a sannyasi who built an ashram and has uh, gained so much of raga towards it, or he's attached to his ashram, and he's worried about its maintenance and worried about what's next and how do I know I'm not getting enough people to contribute to this ashram, etc. He says he is just uh, a sannyasi samsari, or in the ochre robes, this person is also a samsari. And he used to say, on the other hand, even a grihastha with children and grandchildren and all the work and everything else that's happening, if he has handled these three problems, the raga, shoka, moha, that person is a mukta or a liberated person. So throughout Gita, we will see that Krishna is going to emphasize that whether you are married or unmarried, whether you are doing jnana yoga or karma yoga, it doesn't matter. Whether you're internally free or not is what matters. So Arjuna has discovered the problem, but Krishna has not spoken so far. Krishna has not given any solution. And why is that? Because even if I discover a problem, which is what we call as a samasya parijnanam, I will not get a solution from outside because I'm trying to solve the problem by myself. So after trying several methods, when I find the disease, many of us would just do some personal, our self-medicating for some time, or ignoring for some time, and then praying for some time, whatever, we'll find our own first solutions, and then once we give up on those solutions, that's when we go to somebody. So currently Arjuna is doing that. So once all of these fail, all the self-medication fails, then there is a discovery of helplessness, which is called as the karpanyaha. And we will see a beautiful verse, 2:7, where actually the use of word karpanyaha we will see, or a dainya bhavam, where there is a discovery of helplessness, and once that discovery of helplessness happens, then the person is looking for somebody to solve it, or somebody that can help him solve it. So once I know what the problem is, I cannot that once I know what the problem is, and once I realize I cannot solve it myself, then the natural next stage is to surrender to someone else who will give me a hand, and that is where Sharanagati comes into picture. So there are these three stages. Once that Sharanagati comes into picture, then the right guru in this case, or the right doctor, if it's a physical health problem, then we will start getting the medication. So in the first stage, the problem of samsara, now Krishna will start helping Arjuna get out of these things. So Arjuna is now at the end of chapter 1. He's silent. Krishna is also silent. Both, like, Arjuna has left his bow and arrows and sat down. And Krishna is just probably turning his head back and looking at Arjuna in wonderment on what's going on. And probably inside he's still smiling. And yay, thank God I got the opportunity. And this is what I was waiting for, because I have to teach this to billions of people in the future generations. So that's where first chapter ends. Any questions in chapter 1? And we will be going into the exciting chapter 2 starting next week. Any questions, comments, anything that you might have read or anything that occurred to you, thoughts, please feel free to share.
Okay, I have one thing. So, Gita is not about a religious book, it is, in fact, a spiritual book.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yes.
Right?
And depends on
And
how you define spirituality. I call it a book, a lifestyle.
lifestyle. Yes, that's very true. It's a lifestyle. So, it's not what the situation is, it's how you react to the situation makes everything for you. Isn't that right? What
Correct. Correct.
Gita is talking to us about?
Yes. And the
Yeah.
other notion everybody needs to understand is Gita is also not telling us to ignore and move on, or just, stay put and don't do anything about it. So unlike, some other variations of, when we talk about Buddhism or Jainism, there is a lot more like, non-violence and whatnot. Throughout Gita, Bhagavan talks about not hurting unnecessarily, but he will say, you go and fight. If it's your dharma, go do it. So it
Yes.
doesn't tell us to just stay quiet. It tells us what your action is, what you're supposed to do. Go do that and live a lifestyle that you should be living.
That's right. That is, you need to recognize the dharma in your life
Correct.
at that point, right? And dharma can change according to situation, and that's what you have to realize, and that's what a intelligent person should do.
Correct. So not every situation will change dharma. So today my dharma could be one thing and tomorrow could be something else. But what it depends
Exactly.
on is who I am. I'm a grihastha, or what am I doing? Like, and based on my rajo, tamas, and sattva gunas, what's my guna composition? So there is a nice, beautiful chart. When we get to that point, I want to share some real details so everybody can have practical tools, and to know where in the grid do we fall and what our dharma should be and how should we react or act according to that. It's a very practical book to be applied
Yes.
to day-to-day basis. It's not something that we will put on a shelf, or I've noticed which is better than nothing, but I've noticed many people put, like, a nice cloth on Bhagavad Gita and put it in the prayer room, and they pray it for many, many decades, but they have never touched it. And I also say Bhagavad Gita is not for chanting only. It is something to be practiced on a every moment basis.
Yeah.
Good point.
Very true. Yes. Thank you.
Any other thoughts?
So, Sri Deviji, this is Jyoti, and I have a quick question that came into my mind
Sure.
last time we were doing the class. Well, after that, if so, talking about karma and moksha,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody has already attained moksha,
Mm-hmm.
and but somebody owes a karmic debt to them,
Mm-hmm.
how does that work?
An amazing question that I might not be able to answer in 1 minute, but I will still try.
Okay.
If somebody has attained moksha, and we are talking about Jivan Muktas here, right?
Uh-huh.
Moksha is not somebody who passed away. That's what I'm assuming your question is. Is
Uh-huh.
that what it is, or is it for a
Yes.
person
Yes.
who? Okay.
Or even a person who has already died, or somebody who is already on is still living, Jivan Mukta. But let's say it's somebody. Let's say it's you have attained Jivan Mukti, and I owe you some karmic debt. How does
Mhm.
that work then?
So the debt is only on the person who is not in the not attained mukti. The person who is already attained mukti, he doesn't have neither, he's not a karta nor a bhokta. He's neither doing any action, despite
Mm-hmm.
doing all the actions. He's not doing any action and he is not going to reap any fruit of the actions that he has performed. So what we call as the akarta and abhokta. For him, there is no more debt that you owe from his standpoint. But if you owe somebody something, and like I'm not a Jivan Mukta, so I owe somebody something,
Mm-hmm.
then I am supposed to do it so I can actually go get rid of all my debt.
Karmas. Mm-hmm.
But that person is relieved from all of this.
So you have to relieve your karmic debt some other way then.
Probably performing, like, if we have, say, for example, I borrowed something from somebody and suddenly that person became a Jivan Mukta, I still owe him that money. And no matter, like, if that person wants to donate all of that money, I would still have to do the donation on behalf of him and get
Mm.
my debt cleared. But that person may not even have any interest in it, or he may
Yeah.
take that money and use it for some purpose, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But it is in my own interest that I still have to do it.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be materialistic. It could be
Yeah,
something that somebody had emotionally hurt or somebody.
exactly.
So,
All of those have to be cleared here and in this life, so we don't have to go through this craziness one more time. And to be honest, like, after coming to Vedanta and for my, like, the first few weeks when I was listening to this, I had a fantastic life throughout. And I keep thinking,
mhm,
like, when I say samsara, I don't know if it feels like samsara to me. So that's why I keep adding that, like, okay, there is the raga, shoka, moha. I never had any issues with, like, whether I liked winter or summer. I don't regret anything. So I'm always like this happy person, right?
mhm,
But that freedom, or looking for happiness, or that freedom from seeking, that is the other component that we have to consider when we are thinking about. I'm not saying, look, oh yeah, everybody is crying in this world, not necessarily,
mhm.
but everybody is seeking something, and it is freedom from that continuous seeking that we have to get rid of.
Okay.
Great question.
But seeking knowledge should be there, right? Seeking knowledge aspect should be there. Seeking material things, I agree.
Okay, let's think about it this way. What science calls it, the theory of everything. Once a person reaches the point of theory of everything and understands it, everything that they are receiving is more at a cosmic level. They're still receiving that knowledge. They don't have to go and seek it anymore. That's one aspect of it. They will continue to study, they'll continue to just, my Swamiji would have built so many ashrams and continues to get, got involved in even, forced conversions. He was talking to UN. So there were so many activities that he was doing.
Mm.
But it is outside of the purview of the Atman. He can separate himself between the body and mind and what the activities of the body and mind are in this birth from who he really is, which is the Atman. So there are two facets to it, and we will understand more of that, and we'll discuss a lot more about it in chapter 2.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Shall
Thank
we
you.
conclude here?
Yes.
That
Om
was an
Tat
excellent
Saditi.
explanation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you.
Om Tat Saditi. Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishnarjuna Samvade Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama Pradhamodhyayah. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतङ्गमय ॐ शान्तिः 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 हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु सर्वं श्रीमन्नारायण चरणारविन्दार्पणमस्तु. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining. We'll catch up next week for chapter 2.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much,
Thank you.
Sabri.
Shubhratri.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. धन्यवादः.
धन्यवादः.
Thank
Hey,
you.
George.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.